Welcome to Inner Racing by Motorsportmind. This is the audio version of my popular monthly free video series on mental skills in motorsport. I'm your host Greg, and I'm here to share with you practical insights and strategies to help you enhance your mental racing performance both on and off the track. So get ready as we dive deep and explore the mindset behind successful racing, and as we look at practical ways that you can sharpen your racing mental skills performance and gain a competitive edge when you go racing. Let's get started.
Hi everybody, and this week I just want to talk about this idea of being the smartest person in the room. So the smartest person in the room, what does it mean? Well, it's really about awareness. So many of you will know that I'm a big fan of the phrase behavioural flexibility, which basically means the person with the most options, the person whose behaviour is most adaptable, will be the most successful because they can change and they can take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. Rather than somebody who is behaviourally fixed, which means I only do one thing, this is all that I do, and everything else has to match up to me. And we see this in driving and riding as well. And it's generally the difference between Pro-Am and pro drivers is that a pro driver will be able to adapt. You give them any machine and they'll give them a little bit of time, few laps, and they'll be up to speed and they'll be getting the most out of it already. They don't wait for everything to be just right. Again, as a lot of you will know, I use the phrase Goldilocks, driver or rider. We don't need everything to be just right. We can squeeze the maximum performance out of whatever we're given. But being the smartest person in the room helps us be behaviourally flexible. So let's look at some of the elements that go into being the smartest person in the room. So the first thing I would want to talk about is filters, because everything gets filtered. So when we do anything, when I'm talking to you now, I am filtering. My thoughts are being filtered, and I am making generalizations. I am making deletions. I am making distortions. And my own biases, which we covered in a recent video as well, are coming into play. And so deletions, what are deletions? I'm omitting certain things that I don't think are important. I don't want to know. I don't want to think about. And this is all happening unconsciously, but it's happening based upon my biases and my experiences. I also make generalizations. So we make generalizations because it makes it quicker for us to learn things. If I can say, well, this is kind of like that and that's kind of like that, I can treat all of those the same. And so I can instead of having to learn something every single time, I can apply the same rules, the same actions, and the same thoughts to all these things, and I'll get pretty much the same result. And this applies to, again, people, thoughts, biases, situations. I generalize about what's happening. Then we've got distortions, where we perhaps take what's happening, something that somebody said, something that somebody did, and we kind of distort it, we twist it, we skew it towards what it means to us, how it affects us, my opinion on it, which doesn't necessarily mean it's the actual thing itself. It's not objective. And this can really come into play when it comes to things like communication, feedback, and actions. So filters are the things that we experience our world through filters. In a video I did, I think sometime last year, we actually spoke about the 7 ± 2 pieces of information that George Miller, back in the 50s, discovered that we're capable of processing. And this is because there's so much information, I have to funnel it. I have to filter it down because I can't take it all in at the same time. So first of all, everything comes through filters. And if we're aware of that, it helps to make us the smartest person in the room, because I recognize that everybody's running stuff through filters and I'm running things through filters too. So in many ways, it's a miracle we can communicate at all. The next thing that ties into filters that I want to talk about is the difference between what's said and what's heard, and what we look at but don't see. And if you think about those two things, it's filters that apply to that. And we'll have a look at a couple examples to put it in context. So looking but not seeing, it happens a lot. And again, it's all down to filters. We cannot take in everything that we experience. And it will happen on track. It will happen on the paddock. And of course, it's tied to concentration as well, that we've spoken about recently. Looking but not seeing is kind of the thing, you go into the refrigerator looking for that thing that you're after and you just can't see it. And it is there. And there's a great study that they did a few years ago where it was done, I can't remember the university that did it. They got somebody to stop someone and ask them for directions. And halfway through the conversation, they moved a door in between the two people, with two angry men carrying a door, and they moved them in between the the person who was asking for directions and the person who was giving the directions. And as this door moved in between these two people, they swapped the actor who was asking for directions. And only a third of people noticed that they were talking to somebody differently when the door went past. Because we look without seeing. And this can happen on track, it can happen in the paddock, it can happen in the garage. It can happen any time. And again, a lot of it might have to do with how much information I'm having to process at the same time. If I'm trying to process a lot, I'll pay attention to the biggest threat. But looking but not seeing also comes down to our filters. And those same filters apply to what's said and what's heard. And so the point here is we want to look at communication. So when I'm getting feedback from somebody, okay, what they're saying may not be what I'm hearing, because I might be filtering it. I might have an opinion about it. I might feel under attack about it. Their language that they use may not be language that I understand or I use. They might be talking in very mathematical, clinical, objective, right-angled language, as I might call it. And you might think in a far more organic, kinesthetic, touchy-feely language. And this is one of the skills of being a driver or a rider, is to be able to take your experiences, which are primarily feel-based, and translate it into language that people who have a certain way of thinking, so mechanics, engineers, data people, who are more numerically based and more analytical thinking, take your kinesthetic experience and translate it into a language that they can understand. Rather than them talking their language, you talking your language and just banging heads, the smartest person in the room recognizes that this person actually might think differently from me. And how do I make them understand? And it comes back to this fundamental thing about being the smartest person in the room. And that is, the meaning of communication is the response I get. And that means if I'm talking to you and I'm not getting the response I want, I don't say it louder and I don't just keep repeating myself. I recognize this and go, if I want you to answer me or interact with me or behave differently, I have to change what I'm saying. Because if I change what I'm saying, because that's the thing I'm in control of, I can probably elicit a different response from you. So this is so important when it comes to managing the environment, teammates, atmospheres and garages. It comes down to when I'm giving feedback, as we said. When I'm receiving feedback, instead of feeling criticized, instead of feeling that I'm being got at by being told that I'm not good enough or that I'm not doing something, if I listen to what's being said and sort of put that to the side and hear what's being said, rather than just reacting to what's being said and asking for clarification about what's being said. So if I listen to what's being said, and kind of, when we look at what's being heard, a lot of that has an emotional layer over the top of it. So the difference between what's said and what's heard can be huge. And I've seen it a couple of times recently where conflict and tension has arisen between mechanics, team managers, drivers and riders, because what's said and what's heard is different. So somebody thinks they're giving constructive feedback or helpful feedback, or they're asking a positive sort of question, trying to get somebody to do some what we might call inductive learning, where you're asking somebody, well, why did you do that? And again, a lot of you know the thing with why is we don't really know why, because most of what we do is unconscious. But when you constantly ask somebody, well, why are you doing that? Why are you doing this at turn 4? Why? The true answer is I don't know. And a lot of the time you'll get some sort of confabulation or conflation where I make up something that makes the best sense to me. Because I don't know why I did it. But again, a why question can make me feel as if I'm getting under attack, if you like. And the one thing that we've got to remember, and this goes for whether you're a driver, a rider, a manager, a mom or a dad watching this, we're all pushing towards the same objective. We all want to succeed. It's not manager, driver, manager, rider, mom or dad, driver, team, driver. No, we all have a common purpose. We all want to succeed together. We all are going in the same direction. So it's nobody's fault. It's not finger pointing. It's how do we do this better? You know, and when you're receiving feedback, if you're a rider or a driver, when you're getting that feedback, the intention, however it's given, the intention is how do you improve? How can you do what you do even better and succeed even more? So if you're a mom or a dad or a manager or a driver coach, when you're giving feedback, remember, it's about success. It's about helping that person to improve. It's not criticism. We want them to succeed. So we want to be able to communicate in a way that the person engages and goes into it and goes, oh, right, okay, yeah, and is enthusiastic to make the changes to improve their performance. It's not criticism. And if you're a driver or a rider, when you're getting feedback, being the smartest person in the room means that it's not criticism. These people around me, whether it's a data guy, a driver coach, a manager, an engineer, a mom or a dad, they're trying to help you to improve your performance so that we all get to our objective, we all succeed. So it's only when we start to bring in filters and we start to forget about being the smartest person in the room and we begin to react emotionally about things, that's when we start to bang heads. That's when we end up on different paths. And I've seen this happen recently with a team where eventually the person in the team parted company because communication just went further and further and further apart. And they forgot at one point they all had a common purpose. So by being the smartest person in the room at all times, you recognize that your experience is coming through filters. You're generalizing things, you're deleting things, you're distorting things. Then you also realize there's a difference between what's said and what you're hearing, because what you're hearing is filtered and what is said is being filtered by them. You also recognize the difference between what you look at and what you see, because again, what you look at and what you see is filtered. And this goes for the other people around you as well. What they're seeing when they're looking at something has been filtered because they will pay attention to what is important to them at the time in the same way that you do. So being the smartest person in the room is about understanding that you and the people around you filter all the time. And when we filter, it changes how we communicate. And if you can be the smartest person in the room and always be aware of this, when you catch yourself feeling as if there's a little bit of a finger pointing, blame, whatever you think, criticism, you recognize that you're experiencing this and actually have another listen to what's being said. Think about the filters that this person might be using and what is it they're trying to communicate to you to help you succeed. And when you're giving feedback, instead of just saying this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, because you might be feeling emotional because of performance or results, think about you all want to succeed together. So how can you be sure that you're not filtering out important information and also you're communicating this really well to your team? So being the smartest person in the room is super important and it helps you and it helps everybody around you get the very best out of themselves. But it's your job to aim to be the smartest person in the room. Any thoughts, any comments, any questions, just let me know and I'll speak to you next week. Take care. Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of Inner Racing by Motorsport Mind. I hope you found this month's topic valuable in your journey towards peak performance in your racing. To stay updated with the latest content, be sure to subscribe to the newsletter, download the app, and subscribe to the blog. Just visit motorsportmind.com or follow the links.